Okay, this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayakel, begins with the command to observe Shabbos, and then proceeds to the instructions that Moshe Rabbeinu gives to the Jewish people to take a collection and construct the Mishkan. Rashi brings the Mechilta, which says that from the fact that the warning of Shabbos is placed first, we learn that Shabbos overrides the Mishkan, and that the building of the Mishkan is not Darchei Shabbos, does not push aside Shabbos. On this Rashi, the Mizrahi points out that it isn't simply the fact that there's a juxtaposition of Shabbos to the Mishkan. It's specifically because they are placed in this order. Shabbos is placed first, then the Mishkan follows. If the order would have been reversed, if the Torah would have talked about the Mishkan first and then talked about the Lachas of Shabbos, I would have said the opposite. I would have said that that order indicates that the Mishkan overrides Shabbos and the building of the Mishkan is Darchei Shabbos. So it isn't merely the fact that the two parshas are placed next to each other. It's specifically, as Rashi says, because Higdim. It's because the parsha of Shabbos comes first. The Mizrahi points out that if you go back to Parshas Kisisa, there the order is reversed. There, the Ribono Shel Olam first tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Perek Lamed Aleph, Re'ei Karasi B'Shem, behold, I have designated B'Tzalel ben Uri ben Chur Lamata Yehuda. I have designated B'Tzalel to oversee the building of the Mishkan. And the Torah says exactly what he's meant to build: the Ohel Moed and the Aron and the Kaparas and the various Kalim. And only after that do we have the command to observe Shabbos. So there the order is reversed. There we have the Mishkan before the laws of Shabbos. So the Mizrahi points out that Rashi avoided this question. Rashi in Parshas Kisisa points out that the command of Shabbos begins with the word ach, the word but. Ach es shavsosei tishmoru, but you should keep my Shabbos. And Rashi explains the significance of the ach is that although I previously gave you the laws of building the Mishkan, but you have to keep Shabbos. Make sure that you keep Shabbos. Shabbos is not pushed aside by the building of the Mishkan. So the Mizrahi explains that the reason you need that ach is because here the order is reversed. Because here, if not for the ach, I would have said, since the Mishkan is placed first and then the laws of Shabbos, I would have said to the contrary, that the building of the Mishkan is Darchei Shabbos. That's why the Torah had to write the word ach. I should understand that yes, there's a mitzvah to build a Mishkan, but you have to keep Shabbos. So the Mizrahi says that this really is the proof, that the order is the critical factor. If it was simply the juxtaposition, then it would make no difference which is first and which is second. Why would I need the ach? Because since the order is critical, and in Parshas Kisisa the order is reversed, that's where the Torah had to write that extra little word ach, but they're telling me that here, although you have to build the Mishkan, but you have to keep Shabbos, because the building of the Mishkan does not push aside Shabbos. But the question that many Svarim deal with is exactly this, that why is the order reversed? Because in Parshas Vayakel, the Torah presents it simply. It gives us Shabbos first, and then the Mishkan, which tells me that Shabbos has priority. So why in Kisisa does the Torah do the opposite? It puts the Mishkan first, then Shabbos, which necessitates then the extra word ach to tell me that the building of the Mishkan is not Darchei Shabbos. Just reverse the order. There too, mention Shabbos first, and the Mishkan second, and then I know the halacha that Shabbos is priority without that little word ach. Because why reverse the order, and that in turn necessitates inserting the word ach? So this is the question many Svarim deal with. Why in Vayakel is Shabbos placed before the building of the Mishkan, and why in Kisisa is the building of the Mishkan placed before Shabbos? Let's put that question on the back burner for a moment. Now when we read Parshas Vayakel, we tend to think that there's nothing really new in Parshas Vayakel. In a sense, it's really a review of everything we already learned in Parshas Truma. Just Parshas Truma is the tzavah, is the command that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu to build the Mishkan. In Parshas Vayakel, the Mishkan is actually built, but there's no new information. That's why there's very little Rashi in Parshas Vayakel, because much of it seems to be repetitive. But there's an amazing drasha that was written by Rabbi Yeshua Heller. Rabbi Yeshua Heller was a great guy. He was a Talmud Rabbi Shlomo Salanter, wrote a number of very, very important Sfarim. And one of the Sfarim is called Oyel Yoshua, which is a collection of several drashas. And he wrote a very, very, very long drasha, very, very complex drasha, pointing out that there are many differences between Parshas Truma and Parshas Vayakel. Many, many, many differences. Differences of language, differences in order. And obviously we can't cover everything he discusses, but I'd like to point out two observations that he makes. In Parshas Truma, all the instructions as to how the construction should be done are written in the singular. V'yasisa ta'aseh, with one exception, which is the command to build the Aron begins with the plural. V'osu aronas eshitim. They should make an Aron. And the Medrash Rabbah comments on this. The Medrash Rabbah points out that all the time, in the entire Parsha, it says, V'nosata, v'yasisa, ta'aseh, always in the singular. V'yasisa shulchan, v'yasisa asavadim, v'yasisa menorahs, v'samishkan ta'aseh, always singular. The one exception is the command to build the Aron. So the Medrash Rabbah asks the question, and Medrash Rabbah says that the Aron was an exception. That everyone should come and participate in the building of the Aron, so that everyone should have a chelek, everyone should have a portion in Torah. The Aron is the receptacle of Torah. In Torah, everyone should have a portion. So when it came to the Aron, everyone participated. But in everything else, it's singular. Well, who is that one person that was meant to build the Mishkan? Now, the Aron was participatory. Everyone had a portion of the Aron. Symbolizes Torah. Everyone rightfully has a share. Who is this one person that is being addressed in Parshas Truma that he is to make the Shulchan and the Menorah and the Krushim and the Urias? B'Tzalel? Doesn't seem to be so. B'Tzalel was not introduced until Parshas Kisisa. So Rabbi Yeshua Heller comes to the amazing conclusion that apparently it was meant to be Moshe Rabbeinu. That in the initial command to build the Mishkan, except for the Aron, which was separate, the entire process of manufacturing the components was meant to be performed by Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's why the singular is used. And for some strange reason, just as Moshe Rabbeinu was about to receive the Luchas and come down from Har Sinai, Hashem says something astounding. Re'eh karasi b'shem, behold, I have designated B'Tzalel ben Uri ben Chur Lamata Yehuda. And if Yeshua Heller takes this to mean that something happened to change the original plan. Something happened. And before Moshe Rabbeinu left Har Sinai, Hashem said, there's a change. Re'eh karasi b'shem, behold, I have designated B'Tzalel, he's going to do it and not you. And this is a mystery. Why should that be? He points out, by the way, interestingly, the Ramban is troubled by that word re'eh. See, behold, karasi b'shem. Because why introduce this instruction with the word re'eh? Rabbi Yeshua Heller says the answer is very simple. The answer is because it wasn't meant to be. Originally it was meant to be done by Moshe Rabbeinu. And something changed. That just as Moshe Rabbeinu was about to leave Har Sinai, with the Luchas, Hashem said, no, plan B. Re'eh karasi b'shem, B'Tzalel ben Uri ben Chur Lamata Yehuda, he's the one who's going to build the Mishkan. And sure enough, in Parshas Vayakel, when we read the Psukim, we get the clear impression that B'Tzalel is the one who actually does the construction. So, how do we understand this? Another observation he makes is an observation which Tosfos actually makes, Maseches Brachos, Daf Nun Tes, that in Parshas Truma, the order is given, first make the Aron, then the other Kalim, the Kaporetz and the Shulchan, the Menorah, and only then the Mishkan. In Parshas Kisisa, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the command to Moshe Rabbeinu to pass on the instructions to Bezalel. There, HaKadosh Baruch Hu explicitly reverses the order and says, tell Bezalel to make the make the Mishkan, and only then the Aron and the Kalim. In Parshas Vayakel, sure enough, that is the order in which it's done. Now, there's a very, very interesting Gemara in Masechtas Brachos. The Gemara reports a conversation between Moshe and Bezalel, which is not recorded in the Chumash. Now, it's interesting. The Chumash repeats many times the instructions to build a Mishkan. In Parshas Truma, we have Hashem speaking to Moshe. In Kisisa, we have again Hashem speaking to Moshe. In Vayakel, we have Moshe speaking to the Bnei Yisrael. Those are reported fully. But there is no full report in the Torah of Moshe speaking to Bezalel. When Moshe finally calls Bezalel, it says, Vayikra Moshe el Bezalel vel Ohaliyav, he called them to do the Malach. And there are no details about this conversation. So the Gemara Brachos tells us something amazing. The Gemara Brachos says that when Moshe gave the instructions to Bezalel, he told him to make the Aron, Kalim, and Mishkan, in that order. And Bezalel said, how can that be? How can that be? He says, if I make the Kalim first, so the Kalim that I made, where will I put them? The Kalim that I make, where will I put them? He says, it must be that Hashem really told you the opposite. Hashem told you to make the Mishkan first, and then the Aron and the Kalim. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, you're right. Shemot b'tseil keil ha'isa. Maybe you were in the shadow of God. Maybe you were the fly on the wall who overheard the conversation. And the Gemara says, consequently, we understand that his name Bezalel was very apropos, because it was as if he was B'tseil Keil. He figured out on his own what HaKadosh Baruch Hu must have said. Tosfos in Brachos there is troubled that how did the Chazal know that Moshe Rabbeinu reversed the order? There was in the Torah itself, we have two orders. In Parshas Truma, we have the order of Aron first. In Parshas Kisisa, we have the order of Mishkan first. But we don't know what Moshe said to Bezalel, and we don't know what Bezalel said back to him. You know, it's the horror that Tosfos makes. But this changed order also requires explanation. Why is it in Parshas Truma the order is Aron first, and why is it in Parshas Kisisa Kalim first? And ultimately that's the order in which it was done. Now at first glance it would seem that maybe we're dealing just with a practical consideration, as Bezalel said. Bezalel said that the Aron that I make, where will I put it? Of course I have to make the Mishkan first. But it doesn't seem we're talking about a practical consideration, because keep in mind, when it says that Bezalel made the Mishkan first, it means he made the components for the Mishkan first. He didn't assemble the Mishkan. In Parshas Perkudei we know that the components of the Mishkan were brought to Moshe Rabbeinu, and in reality they were completed in the month of Kislev, the Medrash says. And the Mishkan remained disassembled until the following Nisan. And only then was it put together. So even if the components of the Mishkan were made first, but it wasn't assembled, so there was no place to put the Aron. So if they manufactured the Krushim and the Urias and all the parts of the Mishkan, but they were disassembled, you still have the problem. So good, I made the Aron last. Where am I going to put the Aron? I have all the parts of the Mishkan, but I don't have a finished assembled Mishkan into which I'll bring the Aron. So obviously, Bezalel is not coming to solve the practical problem. We're dealing with a conceptual issue, which is rightfully which should come first. Thematically, should the Aron be first or should the Mishkan be first? So you have to understand, what is the underlying issue there? Now, Rabbi Heller points out another interesting thing. Then what is the funny wording of Bezalel when he says, the Aron that I made, where should I put it? What difference does it make who made it? If we're dealing with a question that you have an Aron, where are you going to put it? You need a place for it, so the Mishkan therefore should come first. It makes no difference whether Moshe made it, whether Bezalel made it, whoever made it. What does Bezalel mean when he says, the Aron that I make, where will I put it? As if to say that the problem only starts because Bezalel is the one making the Aron. But if someone else would make the Aron, there wouldn't be a problem. How do you understand this? So Yeshua Heller in his Rosh says an amazing thing. He offers an amazing historical conjecture. Because we know that Klal Yisrael came to Aaron on the 16th of Tammuz and asked Aaron to make the Egel. On the 16th of Tammuz, the Egel was made, and it says that Aaron made a Mizbeach, and he said, Chag LaHashem Mochar, tomorrow will be a holiday to Hashem. And that was, of course, Shivas of Tammuz, on the 17th day of Tammuz. That was the Chag, that was the holiday. That's when people began to worship the Egel. And that's when the HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu to go down, Lech reit kishichei samcha, go down, your nation has become corrupt, they made an Egel and they bowed down to it, and they worshipped it, so go down. Reid migdulascha. You are demoted from your lofty stature, go down, and of course Moshe Rabbeinu went down, and he broke the luchas, and that of course Chazal tell us was on Shivos or B'Tammuz. But the Egel was actually made the day before, on Tez Zayin Tammuz. And the Medrash Rabbah says an amazing thing. The Medrash Rabbah says that at the moment that Aaron was carving the Egel, at that very moment, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was carving the luchas. At the very moment that Aaron was carving the Egel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was carving the luchas. So, Rabbi Yeshua Heller offers the amazing conjecture that last parsha, that parsha of Re'ei Karasi B'Shem, which is the last parsha that was said before HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Moshe the luchos, that parsha was said after the Jews made the Egel, before they worshipped it. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that the Jews had made the Egel. They hadn't worshipped it yet. That only came the next day. But they had made the Egel. And that itself is a chet. Right? Making an Avodah Zarah is also a chet. At that point, Klal Yisrael was greatly diminished. On the next day that they worshipped the Egel, there was even a greater diminution. But already, the day before, when Klal Yisrael made the Egel, their madrega was already reduced. So says Rabbi Yeshua Heller an amazing thing, that the Mishkan really should have been built by Moshe Rabbeinu, as we said. And in Parshas Truma, when it says V'yasisa and Tasa, it is a reference to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Mishkan should have been built by Moshe Rabbeinu. And if it would have been built by Moshe Rabbeinu, it would have been a loftier Mishkan. There's a concept of Kayach Payel Benifal, that the person who does the work, he puts something of himself, he invests something of himself in the work. A Mishkan that would have been made by Moshe Rabbeinu would have been a loftier Mishkan. But because Klal Yisrael made the Egel, they no longer were deserving of such a Mishkan. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, knowing that Klal Yisrael made the Egel, said, Re'ei karasi b'shem B'tzalel ben Uri ben Hur. Behold, I've designated B'tzalel. That wasn't plan A, that was plan B. Plan A was that Moshe Rabbeinu should have built the Mishkan. But when Klal Yisrael made the Egel, at that point HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, they no longer deserve a Mishkan made by Moshe Rabbeinu. Their Mishkan will be the Mishkan that's made by B'tzalel. Re'ei karasi b'shem B'tzalel ben Uri ben Hur l'matei Yehuda. But at that point, they still would have been deserving at least of having the luchas. The next day got even worse. The next day, not only had they made the Egel, they worshipped the Egel. At that point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Lech reit kishichei samcha, your nation has become corrupt. They've worshipped the Egel, go down, and then Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchas. But it's an amazing thing that it was really a two-step process. That for having made the luchas, they already suffered the consequences. That they no longer were zeicha to the Mishkan that would have been built by Moshe Rabbeinu. Now they're only zeicha to the Mishkan that's built by B'tzalel. And then, when they actually worshipped the Egel, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, Reid Migdulascha, go down. And Moshe Rabbeinu determined that they weren't even deserving of having the luchas b'chlal. and the luchas were broken. But this is an amazing conjecture that he offers to explain the first observation, that who is the singular person that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is speaking to throughout Parshas Truma? That's Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was meant to build a Mishkan originally. When the Klal Yisrael manufactured the ego, at that point, Rei Karasi B'Shem B'Tzal B'Nuri B'Chor, Hashem said, Klal Yisrael no longer deserves a Mishkan built by Moshe Rabbeinu. Instead, we're going to have a Mishkan that's built by B'Tzal. Now the question is that what exactly is the difference? In what way was Klal Yisrael's Madrega reduced? And here Rabbi Shua Heller offers another fascinating conjecture. He points out that we've talked about this many times. The Rambam talks about these categories, and the PLAYTIME talks about these categories. That there are two types of people. There is the person who naturally has a desire for doing the right thing. There is no internal resistance. There is no opposition that has to be overcome. The person naturally wants to do the Ratzon Hashem, wants to do the right thing. And he does it happily, in a state of tranquility, serenity, peace of mind. That the Rambam calls the chassid. That is the pious person who wants to do the right thing and does the right thing. Then you have the person of whom it's a struggle. It's a struggle. He has the Yetzer Hara. There's internal resistance. He overcomes it. He does the right thing. But it's a fight. It's a battle. That the Rambam calls the Kovei Shes Yitzro, the person who suppresses his Yetzer Hara. And we talked about these categories. The PLAYTIME has a different taxonomy for them. But these are two types of Jews. Says Rabbi Shua Heller that Klal Yisrael before the Chet HaEgel, they were in the higher Madrega. Chazal say they were like Malachim. There was a natural desire to do the right thing. They did it happily. They were on the Madrega of Chassid. Says after the Chet HaEgel they were diminished, and now there was the Yetzer Hara, now there's resistance. Now, even if they do the right thing, it's with a struggle. And therefore they're on the Madrega of Kovei Shes Yitzro. And this, says Rabbi Shua Heller, accounts for the difference in the order of Aron first versus Mishkan first. Why? So listen to what he says, an amazing thing. And there's an idea which many Sfarim say, that the Mishkan really corresponds, it's a microcosm of the universe. And the universe really corresponds to the Adam, to man. Like the Malbim puts it this way, that the Mekubalim say that the universe is an Adam Gadol, and the person is an Olam Katan. A human being is a microcosm of the universe, and the universe is a macrocosm of the person. But there is a correspondence between the person and the universe. And there's a correspondence between the Mishkan and the person and the universe. So Bishwala says like this, the Kalim of the Mishkan, and the Malbim also talks about this, the Kalim of the Mishkan correspond to the internal mind and heart of the human being. The intellect, the emotions, which are internal, they're innermost. The Kalim of the Mishkan, the Aron, the Shulchan, the Menorah, correspond to those. The outer structure, the walls of the Mishkan, the courtyard of the Mishkan, these correspond to the limbs, the body of the person. Now we know that for the chassid, for the person who desires to do the right thing, his actions flow from his mind. In other words, he has a natural desire to do the right thing, and as a consequence, he does the right thing. So the direction is from mind to action. He yearns to do the right thing, and therefore he does the right thing. For the Kovesh Yitzra, who has to overcome resistance, the hope is the opposite. The hope is that from doing the right thing, hopefully he will train himself to think properly, to have proper values. As the Mesilas Yesharim says famously, that sometimes a person who is naturally a Zariz, a person who is naturally a diligent person in the performance of mitzvahs, his midah of Zrizus will bring him to do things in a swift, energetic way. And sometimes it's the opposite. That doing things in a swift, energetic way will inspire him to achieve the midah of Zrizus. Your external actions will condition your thinking and your feelings. And these two pathways, whether we progress from mind to action or from action to mind, really correspond to the two categories we were speaking of. The person who's on the madrega of chassid, so his values are correctly aligned, he's thinking clearly, he understands what's important in life, so therefore accordingly, from his mind, directives are sent to his limbs to do the right thing. So it starts with proper thinking, proper values, and ultimately moves on to proper actions. In the case of the Kovish Yitzra, it's the opposite. Right? His values are not so I. He doesn't think clearly, he doesn't know what he really wants, his priorities aren't necessarily what they should be, but he forces himself to act in a certain way, and the hope is that through conditioning, if he acts a certain way, ultimately that will have influence on his internal patterns of thought. So it really goes the other way. So that really is symbolized by two aspects of Mishkan. A Mishkan where the Arayin is first, where the Kalim are first, is a Mishkan where the thoughts have priority, and from the thoughts emerge directions to the Klei HaMasa, to the limbs. So first you have the Aron and Kalim, which are internal, and then you have the walls and the courtyard, which are external. Right? A Mishkan which has Mishkan first and Kalim last is a Mishkan where it's the opposite, where the hope is that by engaging in activities which are, in a sense, external and superficial, hopefully it will inspire the Pnimius, it will inspire the inner reflection and inner orientation. So you have the Mishkan first, the courtyard and the walls, and only then do you have the Kalim. Before the Chet HaEgel, Klal Yisrael was on a madrega that they were Hasidim, as we explained. And therefore on that madrega, they were right to have a Mishkan, which would be Arayin, Kalim, and only then Mishkan. After the Chet HaEgel, they were diminished, and therefore they were only right to have a Mishkan, as we said, built by Betzalel, but it also had to be a Mishkan that was Mishkan, and then Aron and Kalim. So Yeshua Heller says an amazing thing. He says that when Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Betzalel, and he reversed the order and told Betzalel to make the Mishkan Aron first, why did Moshe Rabbeinu do that? So it says in Yeshua Heller, because Moshe Rabbeinu was the great defender of Klal Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu held that after all the tefillas and all the taniyos that he fasted to beseech HaKadosh Baruch Hu on behalf of Klal Yisrael, undoubtedly HaKadosh Baruch Hu restored Klal Yisrael to their original madrega, and again they were right to have a Mishkan which would be Aron and Kalim first. So he told Betzalel, build the Mishkan with Aron and Kalim and then the Mishkan. To which Betzalel answered, I don't understand. He says, if Klal Yisrael really was restored to that madrega, then you should be building the Mishkan. If I'm building the Mishkan, and not you, that means Klal Yisrael has not been restored to its original madrega. So, and that he said, that the Aron that I build, where will I put it? Meaning, if you're building the Mishkan, you're right. It makes sense to make the Aron first. But if I'm building the Mishkan, it makes no sense that I should make the Aron first. A Mishkan that I build has to be made with the Mishkan first. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're right. Shema b'tzial kel ha'isa. If you understood that, you must have been in the shadow of the Ribono Shel Olam when it was said. But it's an amazing pshat that the Mishkan of Moshe Rabbeinu conceptually is Aaron and Kalim and then Mishkan. The diminished Mishkan of Betzalel is the other way. It's Mishkan and then Aaron and Kalim. So Betzalel said, if you're telling me to build a Mishkan with Aaron first, that makes no sense. If it can be Aaron first, then you should be building it. If I'm building it, a Mishkan that I build has to be Mishkan first and not Kalim first. That's what Rabbi Shua says in the drasha. Amazing, amazing thing. Rabbi Shua also points out another amazing observation based on all of the above. Actually, this is one of the Hagdamas to the drasha. He says, we know that there are two versions in the Aseres Dibros of the Dibur of Shabbos. We have the version in Parshas Yisro, and we have the version in Parshas Voschana. And if you look at the two, you see they're totally different. In terms of the reasons for Shabbos. In Parshas Yisro, the Torah says to remember Shabbos. Why? Ki sheishes yomim osa Hashem es hashemayim v'es haaretz. For 6 days Hashem made heaven and earth, es yomas kol hashabam, the ocean, all therein. V'yanach b'yom hashvi, and he rested on the seventh. Al kain beirach Hashem es yom Shabbos vayikatsheyu. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed Shabbos and he sanctified it. That's the rationale behind the observance of Shabbos. In Parshas Voschana, in the second version of the Aseres Dibros, there's a totally different emphasis. There the Torah says, you should keep Shabbos. V'zacharta ki eved ha'yisa b'eretz Mitzrayim. You should remember that you were a slave in Eretz Mitzrayim, and Hashem took you out. Al kain tzivcha Hashem aleikacha lasos es yom Shabbos. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded you to keep Shabbos. How do you account for the difference? So the Rishuel says a brilliant explanation. He says like this: let's say you are a chassid. You are a chassid. You are not madrega, that lofty madrega, that you want to do the right thing. So as soon as I inform you that X is the Ratzon Hashem, and this is the idea which underlies it, of course you'll be naturally motivated to observe it. But if you're a kovish, this yitzro, it's not enough to tell you the importance of the mitzvah or the beauty of the mitzvah. How are you going to overcome the resistance? How are you going to overcome the obstacles? I have to give you some type of hisayrus that will enable you to overcome the resistance you have. The version in Parshas Yisro, this was the original version that was given before the Chet HaEgel. At that point, Klal Yisrael was in the madrega of Chassid. So all HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to tell them is that Shabbos is holy, and Shabbos is blessed, and it symbolizes the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the world in 6 days, and that's all they needed to hear. Of course they want to keep Shabbos. It's the right thing to do. It's beautiful. It's holy. Of course we're going to keep Shabbos. We don't need any more encouragement, more incentive. It's the right thing to do. Of course we're going to do it. But the second Dibros, that's after the Chet HaEgel. Klal Yisrael is diminished. It's not enough anymore to tell people that it's beautiful and it's holy and it's blessed and it commemorates the fact that Hashem made the world in 6 days. But, we want to go to the mall Saturday. Right? How are we going to overcome the resistance? The Yetzer Hara not to keep Shabbos. So, the second Dibros bring it down to earth. Remember you were an Eved, you were a slave, you are beholden to the Ribono Shel Olam, you owe him, and therefore he commands you to keep Shabbos. Says, for the person who has to overcome the Yetzer Hara, so you make him feel guilty. He says, listen, we owe God one. He took us out of Mitzrayim. Beis Avadim, we were enslaved. The freedom we enjoy is thanks to him. We have to show a little gratitude. So we have to keep Shabbos. In other words, that version only became necessary after the Chet HaEgel. That's how you account for this difference between the two. I would like to offer the following conjecture. If not for the Chet HaEgel, if the Mishkan would have been built by Moshe Rabbeinu, it is possible that he could have built it on Shabbos too. Because why is that? See, when we think about what Shabbos symbolizes and what Mishkan symbolizes, really the Meshech Chochmah points this out. Shabbos is the testimony to Chidush Ha'olam. It's the testimony that God, once upon a time, going back 5,773 years, created the world, Yesh Me'ayin, ex nihilo, out of nothingness. Shabbos testifies to Chidush Ha'olam. But we know that Chidush Ha'olam is only the foundation. We go beyond that. We understand that there's something more than Chidush Ha'olam. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mashgiach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu oversees, and he controls, and he manages the world on an ongoing basis. You can believe in the Chidush Ha'olam, that God created the world, and then he stepped back. He's now disengaged. You can conjecture that. We believe that it's not just God created the world. He is involved in the world, he is engaged in the world, he manages the world, he is present in the world. What symbolizes God's ongoing involvement? Mishkan. The idea of a Mishkan is a place where God's Shekhinah is present. Means that God has not withdrawn, God is still involved, he is still engaged, he is still concerned. It is from here that all sorts of divine influence flow to the world. That's what Mishkan is. Mishkan really is a level of understanding which is even loftier than Shabbos. And therefore, in a sense, one could have argued that maybe building Mishkan should be Darchei Shabbos. Because Yesh Bechlal Mosai Mona. Right? 200 includes 100. Because Mishkan already includes what Shabbos affirms and takes it to a higher level. So why should Shabbos prevent me from building the Mishkan? But it seems the rule is as follows. Let's say, for example, you have mastered mathematics on all its levels: arithmetic, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus. And I want to give you math problems because you enjoy doing math. So what would I give you? Addition problems? Subtraction problems? You're already on a higher level. You're already doing calculus. So if I'm giving you math problems because you enjoy them, I'll certainly give you the loftiest problems. Yesh B'chal Mosai Amona. If you can do calculus, undoubtedly you can do trigonometry and algebra and arithmetic too. But let's say, for example, that you have not mastered mathematics. It would be insane for me to give you calculus problems if you haven't yet mastered the foundations, because you haven't done arithmetic yet. You see, if Klal Yisrael was on the Madrega of Chassid, if Klal Yisrael was on that lofty Madrega, where they understand exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is getting at, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu's role is, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu's interest in the world is, and the observance of Shabbos and Mishkan are really expressions of the natural understanding which Klal Yisrael possesses in any case, then you can make a very strong argument. It says, why would we want Klal Yisrael to express the lower ideal of Shabbos if it can express the higher ideal of Mishkan. So there'd be a very good svara that building the Mishkan should supersede Shabbos. Because Mishkan affirms much more than Shabbos affirms. Shabbos only affirms Chidush Ha'olam. But Mishkan affirms not only Chidush Ha'olam, it affirms the idea of Hashgacha, God's ongoing involvement in the world. So if the person fully understands and he wishes to express his understanding, it makes more sense to express Mishkan than to express Shabbos. So Klal Yisrael would have been on the Madrega of Chassid, then I would conjecture that building the Mishkan would have been Darchei Shabbos. It would supersede Shabbos. Because building the Mishkan affirms much more than the observance of Shabbos affirms. But once Klal Yisrael is diminished, and they're no longer on the level that they have these natural, intuitive understandings, and they only come to them through the observance, we can't jump to calculus before we've mastered algebra. So first we have to deal with the fundamentals. Shabbos is the fundamental. But Chidush Ha'olam, a full grasp of Chidush Ha'olam is necessary before you proceed to the subject of Hashgacha, an ongoing involvement, divine providence. And therefore, after the Chet HaEgel, the Klal Yisrael needs to learn its lessons because they no longer come naturally. We only learn our lessons from our experience, therefore it's the opposite. Shabbos supersedes the Mishkan, because you can't jump to the advanced level until you've mastered the fundamental level. So since the lesson of Shabbos is more basic, because it testifies to Chidush Ha'olam, to creation, and only on that foundation do we build the concept of Hashgacha, so therefore Shabbos has to be observed at all costs, and Mishkan will come later. On Sunday we'll turn to the Mishkan. But Shabbos we have to devote to the lesson of Shabbos, which is Chidush Ha'olam. So if not for the Chet HaEgel, Avada, if Moshe Rabbeinu would have built the Mishkan, it could be he would have built the Mishkan on Shabbos. And therefore, it's true that thematically it should be presented as it was presented in Parshas Vayakel. If Shabbos supersedes the Mishkan, it makes perfect sense. First you talk about Shabbos, then you talk about the Mishkan. But in Parshas Kisisa, it could not have said Shabbos first. Because it makes no sense to put Shabbos first until after you explain that B'Tzalel is one building the Mishkan. Until you explain that the Klal Yisrael has been diminished, as a consequence, it's not Moshe building the Mishkan, it's B'Tzalel building the Mishkan. And it's a lower Mishkan, it's a Mishkan of Mishkan first and then Kalim, which symbolizes the fact that Klal Yisrael is in that lower level. Now it makes sense that Shabbos should supersede. So to put in Parshas Ki Sisa, Shabbos and then Mishkan would make no sense. First you have to tell me exactly what happened to the Mishkan. Rei Karasi B'Shem. Behold, it's no longer Moshe's Mishkan. Now it's B'Tzalel's Mishkan. It's no longer a Mishkan where Aaron comes first. It's no longer a Mishkan where action flows from mind. It's a Mishkan which is Mishkan first, which means that mind comes from action, where we have to be conditioned through doing correct deeds. If it's going to be such a Mishkan, because Klal Yisrael is not Madrega, then Shabbos has to have priority. Because we can't proceed to the lesson of Mishkan until we've mastered the lesson of Shabbos. If our learning of Shabbos, or our practice of Shabbos, is not an expression of that which we already know, but it's an observance which is designed to impress an idea upon us, it is so fundamental it can't be dispensed with. As we said, there are certain times that our mitzvahs express our innermost feelings. And sometimes the purpose of the mitzvah is to impress upon us what we are meant to think. That is the difference between what Shabbos would have been and what Shabbos became after the Chet HaEgel. So before the Chet HaEgel, that Shabbos was an expression of that which we already knew, then Mishkan could have superseded Shabbos. Because Mishkan is a higher level of understanding than Shabbos. Shabbos relates to Chidush Ha'olam. Mishkan relates to ongoing Hashgacha. But now the Klal Yisrael has been diminished to the point that these observances are not expressions of what we already know, but rather they're designed to impress upon us correct thinking. So then we have to master Shabbos before we proceed to Mishkan. And therefore Shabbos is not nidches, it's not pushed aside by the Melechas HaMishkan. But in terms of the order of the Parshas in Kisisa, first HaKadosh Baruch Hu has told Moshe Rabbeinu what happened to the Mishkan. So therefore, first we have the Parsha of Rei Karasi B'Shem, that it's no longer Moshe's Mishkan, now it's Betzalel's Mishkan. It's no longer a Mishkan of Aaron first, it's a Mishkan of Kalim first. As a consequence, that's why Shabbos comes first. Shabbos supersedes the Mishkan. Therefore, the order of the Parsha is Meduyik. So in Vayakel, there, since we already know what is what, we can put Shabbos first, and then Mishkan, because that is the priority, Shabbos and then Mishkan. But in Kisisa, until we discuss the Mishkan and explain what happened to the Mishkan, it makes no sense to invoke the ideal of Shabbos. So there we talk about the Mishkan first, how it was reduced, then we proceed to Shabbos. Of course, that necessitates that little word ach, to tell me, but make sure to keep Shabbos. But the order there had to be exactly as it was. But the interesting point that we should extract from all this is that this really is the consequence of the Chet HaEgel. Before the Chet HaEgel, as Chazal say, we were like Malachim. Everything came natural to us. Our understanding was intuitive. And therefore, everything we did was an expression of that which we already know. So after the Chet HaEgel, we're no longer that much Vega. Now, the things that we do are not expressions of what we already know, but they are done in the hope that from doing them, we'll come to understand what it is that we're meant to think. And therefore, as well, when we do mitzvahs, right, our yearning and our hope is that through the doing of the mitzvahs, we will condition ourselves to proper ideals and proper values.